Good day, everyone. Again, welcome to my channel. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos to come. For today's tutorial, what we are going to learn is another method of factoring polynomials. In the previous video, what we have discussed is all about factoring polynomials with GCF or GCMF. This time, we are going to factor polynomials that are difference of two squares. Ano nga ba itong difference of two squares? How will we know that the polynomial given is a difference of two squares? Well, it has to meet three conditions. First, it has to be a binomial. When we say binomial, these are polynomials that are consist of two terms. So, dapat merong two terms. Number two, both terms of the binomial should be perfect squares. Meaning, yung first term ay dapat perfect square at yung second term ay dapat ding perfect square. Mamaya, mas malalaman natin kung paano ma-determine na ang isang number ay perfect square or not. Number three, conditions. The two terms are separated by subtraction, meaning yung operation between the first term and the second term is subtraction. Let's take a look at this polynomial. A squared minus b squared. Let us see if this polynomial here meets the three conditions above. Yung polynomial ba na to is a binomial? Since binubuo siya ng two terms, the first term is a squared and the second term is b squared, so therefore we are sure that this polynomial here is actually a binomial. So na-meet niya yung first condition. How about the second condition? Are both terms perfect squares? Yung a squared ba at saka yung b squared are perfect square? Obviously, the variables are being squared, so therefore these terms here are really perfect squares. Ano nga ba natin malalaman kung kailan perfect square yung variable? Kapag ang exponent niya ay 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on, meaning even numbers, those variables are considered to be perfect squares. Okay? Next, the two terms are separated by subtraction. Kung mapapansin natin, may minus sa gitna. So therefore, these two terms here is really separated by the operation subtraction. So meaning, etong polynomial na nasa baba, it meets the three conditions above. So therefore, this polynomial here is actually a difference of two squares. Difference of two squares is factored like this. A squared minus b squared is equal to the quantity a plus b times the quantity a minus b. This part here is the difference of two squares. A squared is a perfect square, b squared is also a perfect square, separated by subtraction. It is a binomial, so therefore it meets all the three conditions, and therefore it is a difference of two squares. This part here is the factor of a squared minus b squared. At kung mapapansin natin, a plus b, a minus b. Same terms, ang only difference is the operation between plus and minus. At ang tawag natin doon, sum and difference of two terms. Ano yung two terms na tinutukoy? Yung A at saka yung B. Parehas lang naman, A at saka yung B. Sum and difference because the operation here are addition and subtraction or plus and minus. Okay, before we actually proceed to our examples, let us have this activity. Let us identify whether the following numbers are perfect squares or not. Let's take a look at 25. Is 25 a perfect square or not? Can we think of a number that when multiplied by itself will yield to a product of 25? Makakaisip ba tayo ng number na pag minultiply sa sarili niya, ang magiging sagot ay 25? Yes, it is 5. Because 5 times 5 is 25. And the square root of 25 is 5. And it is a whole number. Therefore, 25 is a perfect square. How about 35? Can we think of any number multiplied by itself that will yield a product of 35? Pag nag-multiply kaya tayo ng 5 times 5, that would be 25. Mas mababa kay 35. Pag nag-multiply kaya tayo ng 6 times 6, that would be 36. Lampas naman siya kay 35. So meaning, walang number or walang whole number na i-multiply natin sa sarili niya na ang magiging sagot ay 35. Therefore, yung square root of 35 is not a whole number but a decimal. Therefore, 35 is not a perfect square. How about 81? Is 81 a perfect square? Can we think of a number multiplied by itself that would yield the product of 81? Yes, that is 9 multiplied by itself. 9 times 9, that is 81. Or the square root of 81 is 9. So therefore, 81 is a perfect square. How about 40? Can we think of any number multiplied by itself that will yield a product of 40? Wala. So therefore, 40 is not a perfect square because the square root of 40 is not a whole number. How about 144? Is 144 a perfect square? Yes, 144 is indeed a perfect square because if we are going to multiply 12 by itself, 12 times 12, that would be 144. And the square root of 144 is 12. So therefore, it is a perfect square. Okay, so since we already know how to identify numbers that are perfect square and not perfect square, so therefore, I think we are ready to answer the following examples. First, we have 9x squared minus 100. Is the first term a perfect square? 9 is a perfect square. X squared is also a perfect square. The second term, which is 100, is also a perfect square because its square root is 10. And the two terms are separated by the operation subtraction. So therefore, this example here is really a difference of two squares. How are we going to factor this out? Una, maglagay na tayo agad ng dalawang pares ng parentheses that represents the first factor and the second factor. Next, let us get the square root of 9. What is the square root of 9? That is 3. How about the square root of x squared? The square root of x squared is x because x times x is x squared. So yung first term ng first factor natin is 3x. Isulat din natin siya rito sa kabila. Because 3x times 3x is 9x squared. And then, plus and minus, katulad ng sabi natin kanina, it should be sum and difference. And then next, what is the square root of 100? The square root of 100 is 10. Sulat din natin sa second term ng second factor, that is 10. Because 10 times 10 is 100. Okay, let us check. 3x times 3x is 9x squared. 10 times 10 is 100. Difference of two squares, sum and difference of two terms. Okay? So these two factors here are the factors of 9x squared minus 100. Okay, let us now proceed to the second example. M squared minus 49. First, let us identify or let us determine whether the first term is a perfect square or not. Its exponent is 2, so therefore it is a perfect square. How about 49? Is 49 a perfect square? Yes, because 7 times 7 is 49, or the square root of 49 is 7. Katulad ng ginawa natin sa first example, for us to be able to factor this out, ang unang gagawin natin, maglagay na agad tayo ng dalawang pares ng parentheses. Ibig sabihin, etong una represents the first factor at etong pangalawa naman represents the second factor. Next step, let us get the square root of the first term. What is the square root of m squared? That is m. Kung ano yung nilagay natin dito sa first term ng first factor, yun din yung ilalagay natin dito sa first term ng second factor because m times m is m squared. Since yung factors ng difference of two squares are sum and difference of two terms, so therefore maglagay tayo ng plus and minus. Next, how about the square root of 49? The square root of 49 is 7. Ilagay din natin sa kabila 7 because 7 times 7 is 49. Difference of two squares, sum and difference of two terms. Okay, let's proceed to another example. Number 3, 25a squared minus 9b squared. Obviously, the first term here is a perfect square because 25 is a perfect square and a squared is also a perfect square. The second term, 9b squared, is also a perfect square because 9 is a perfect square and b squared is also a perfect square. So the first step that we need to do is maglagay tayo ng dalawang pares ng parentheses. Let's take the square root of 25. What is the square root of 25? That is 5. How about the square root of a squared? That is a. Kung anong nilagay natin dyan, yun din ang ilalagay natin dito. That is 5a. And then since difference of two squares, ano dapat dito? Sum and difference of two terms. So that is plus and minus. Square root of 9 is 3. The square root of b squared is b. So therefore, that is 3b. Kung ano yung nilagay natin dyan, yun din natin ilalagay natin sa second term ng second factor, and that is 3b. Okay, let us check. 5a times 5a, 25a squared. 3b times 3b, 3b, 9b squared. Therefore, the factors of this 25a squared minus 9b squared are 5a plus 3b and 5a minus 3b. Okay, next example, 16 minus 81x squared. Obviously, 16, which is the first term, is a perfect square. 81x squared is also a perfect square. So to factor this out, maglagay ng two pairs of parentheses. Get the square root of the first term. The square root of 16 is 4. Ilagay natin sa kabila, 4. Because 4 times 4 is 16. And then difference of two squares should be sum and difference of two terms. So that would be plus and minus. Square root of 81 is 9. The square root of x squared is x. So 9x. Kung ano yung sinulat natin dito, sa second term ng first factor should also be the second term of the second factor. So 4 times 4 is 16. 9x times 9x is 81x squared. Difference of two squares, so therefore sum and difference of two terms 4x and 9x. Okay, let's proceed to the last example. We have x raised to 4 minus y raised to 4. Since the exponent of x and the exponent of y is 4, and it is an even number, therefore these two terms here are considered perfect square dahil yung exponent nila ay 4, which is an even number. So how are we going to get the factors of x raised to 4 minus y raised to 4? The same method as we have done with examples number 1 to 4, ganun din ang gagawin natin ka example number 5. Maglagay ng two pairs of parentheses. This represents the first factor, and this one here represents the second factor. And then get the square root of the first term. This is x raised to 4. Anong square root ng x raised to 4? That is x squared. Because x squared times x squared is x raised to 4. And then, since difference of two squares siya, again, sum and difference of two terms, or plus and minus. How about the square root of y raised to 4? That is y squared. Sulat din natin sa kabila, y squared, because y squared times y squared is y raised to 4. So these are the factors of x raised to 4 minus y raised to 4. Pero kung mapapansin natin, yung second factor dito na x squared minus y squared is actually still in the form a squared minus b squared. So meaning yung x squared minus y squared dito is still considered to be difference of two squares. Kasi perfect square pa rin yung x squared. Perfect square pa rin yung y squared. Tapos yung operation between them is subtraction. So therefore, this one here is difference of two squares. Unlike yung unang factor, plus yung nasa gitna, so ang gagawin natin, kopyahin lang natin yung first factors. Or first factor rather. X squared plus y squared. How about the second factor? Since this is still a difference of two squares, we can still factor this out into two factors. The square root of x squared is x. Sulat din natin sa kabila, x. Difference of two squares, yung factor niya dapat sum and difference of two terms, so plus and minus. Square root of y squared is y. Sulat din natin sa kabila, y. So yung factor ng x raised to 4 minus y raised to 4 is equal to the quantity x squared plus y squared times the quantity x plus y times the quantity x minus y. Kung mapapansin natin, yung second factor natin dito ay finactor out ulit natin. Bakit? Kasi yung form niya is still difference of two squares. Okay, so that would be all for today. Again, good day and God bless everyone.